You have been told that raised beds are the answer to all your gardening problems. Pinterest boards overflow with beautiful cedar frames. YouTube thumbnails promise perfect vegetables in neat wooden boxes. Home improvement stores dedicate entire aisles to expensive bed kits and premium imported soil. But here is what nobody wants to tell you. Those gorgeous raised beds might actually be working against your plants and your wallet. There is a technique that consistently outperforms raised beds in scientific trials. It costs almost nothing to start. It requires less physical labor, and it is based on how nature has grown plants successfully for 500 million years. Welcome to Secrets Beneath Nature. If you find value in understanding how the natural world actually works, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment telling me about your own gardening setup. I read every single one. Let me paint a picture you might recognize. You scroll through social media and see these immaculate raised bed gardens. Clean lines, organized rows, no weeds in sight. The soil looks dark and rich. The vegetables look like they belong in a magazine. So you think to yourself that this is clearly the way to grow food. You head to the store. You buy lumber or metal frames. You purchase bags and bags of soil mix. Maybe you splurge on that fancy triple mix everyone recommends. You spend an entire weekend building and filling these beds. Your back aches, your wallet feels lighter, but you feel accomplished. Then the bills start adding up. Research from the University of Maryland in 2021 found that a single 4x8 raised bed can cost up to $225 when you factor in lumber and bag soil. A study of real home gardeners showed that some families spent over $2,500 to create a modest 120 square foot kitchen garden. That is not a typo. $2,500. The national average cost for topsoil delivery alone runs between $262 and $1,015. And here is something the gardening industry conveniently forgets to mention. Wooden frames rot, metal frames rust. You will need to replace them eventually, but cost is only part of the problem. Virginia Tech research points out that wooden raised beds require purchasing soil to fill them, adding significant expense and difficulty. What exactly are you buying? Imported soil of unknown quality, potentially contaminated material, soil completely devoid of established biological communities. You are essentially starting from zero every single time. There is another issue that rarely gets discussed. Water. Raised beds drain fast. Too fast sometimes. Think of a sponge sitting on a countertop versus a sponge sitting on a wet towel. The isolated sponge dries out quickly. Research from the University of Georgia confirms that in-ground beds will not dry out as quickly as raised beds, and therefore require less water to maintain. During a hot summer, you might find yourself watering those raised beds every single day, while your neighbor with in-ground gardens waters twice a week. Temperature creates problems too. Those raised beds that warm up nicely in spring also cool down faster and freeze earlier during winter. They provide less protection for your plants against frost and frigid nights. In-ground beds retain heat for longer. The earth itself acts as a thermal battery that raised beds simply cannot replicate. So if raised beds have all these hidden downsides, why does everyone still recommend them? Because they look tidy, because they feel controlled, because they match our cultural obsession with dominating nature rather than working with it. But to understand why this approach often fails, we need to look deeper, literally. Imagine for a moment that you could shrink yourself down to microscopic size and walk through healthy garden soil. What would you find? A wasteland of dirt particles? Empty space? Far from it. You would discover a city more complex than New York or Tokyo or London. A single gram of soil may contain billions of microbial cells and 1 million genetically distinct types. Billions in a single gram. That is less than a teaspoon. Scientists studying soil biology describe entire civilizations existing beneath our feet. There are highways of fungal threads, factories of bacteria, processing nutrients, communication networks transmitting chemical signals across vast underground distances. The most remarkable citizens of this underground metropolis are the mycorrhizal fungi. These microscopic organisms have been partnering with plants for approximately 450 million years. Long before dinosaurs walked the earth, long before flowers existed, plants and fungi were already cooperating in sophisticated ways. Here is how this partnership works. Plants can photosynthesize. They turn sunlight into sugar. Fungi cannot do this, but fungi can do something plants struggle with. They can mine minerals from rock and soil particles. They can extend their thread-like bodies called hyphae across enormous distances. Some fungal networks span entire forests, so the deal is simple. Plants share their sugars with the fungi. In return, fungi share minerals with the plants. Scientists at the University of Florida found that approximately 80 to 90% of terrestrial plants form these mycorrhizal partnerships. Research shows that plants can obtain up to 80% of their phosphorus from mycorrhizal fungi alone. The fungal network dramatically extends what a plant can reach. Imagine your roots can only access water and nutrients within a few inches of your stem. Now imagine connecting to a network that extends dozens of feet in every direction. That is what mycorrhizal fungi provide. They are like a fiber optic internet for the plant kingdom. But this incredible system has a weakness. It cannot survive disturbance. When you dig or till the soil, you physically tear apart these fungal networks. The Soil Association in the United Kingdom explains that most plant roots team up with fungal networks working in partnership. The fungi feed off sugars from the roots, while the plant uses the expansive fungal network to receive nutrients and water beyond its own catchment. These delicate networks are doomed to die if the soil is turned. The fungi cannot tolerate exposure to the air. This is the hidden cost of traditional gardening that nobody talks about. Every time you dig, you demolish infrastructure that took years to build. Washington State University research confirms that microbial biomass is consistently higher in very low disturbance systems compared to high disturbance cropping systems. Tillage decreases stability in both macroaggregates and microaggregates, and it accelerates turnover time. In plain language, digging destroys the very foundation of soil fertility. The Royal Horticultural Society summarizes decades of research by stating that scientific evidence shows cultivation damages soil structure and disrupts the natural processes that occur within it. This makes minimal disturbance a better choice for soil health. There is another problem with digging that many gardeners experience firsthand. Weeds. When you turn the soil, you bring buried weed seeds to the surface. These seeds can remain dormant for decades, waiting for their moment. One pass with a shovel or tiller and suddenly thousands of weed seeds receive the light and oxygen they need to germinate. You create the very problem you were trying to prevent. So what is the alternative? It has many names: no-dig gardening, no-till, lasagna gardening. But the concept is simple. Stop disturbing the soil, feed it from above, let nature do the heavy lifting. Charles Dowding is perhaps the most famous practitioner of this method. He is a British gardener and author who has been refining this approach since 1982. For over 40 years, he has tested and documented results on his farm called Home Acres in Somerset, England. But he is not the only one. Japanese farmer Masanobu Fukuoka started pioneering research in this domain in 1938. Ruth Stout promoted similar methods in the United States during the 1950s. This is not some trendy gardening fad. This is a return to how humans grew food for thousands of years before industrial agriculture. The core principle is elegant. Instead of digging nutrients into the soil, you add organic matter on top and let soil organisms pull it downward. Just like in a forest where leaves fall and decompose without anyone tilling them under. You are mimicking the natural cycle that has built fertile soils across the planet. Does it actually work? The evidence is remarkable. Charles Dowding has conducted side-by-side trials comparing dig and no-dig beds for over 12 years, using identical compost amounts and plant varieties. His 2018 results showed the dig bed produced 79.7 kilograms of vegetables. The no-dig bed produced 104.13 kilograms. That is a difference of over 30% in favor of no-dig. The same garden, the same plants, the same inputs, just different methods. Long-term data from his trials covering 7 years showed the dig bed produced 656 kilograms in total. The no-dig bed produced 728 kilograms. Dowding himself states that every year his farm gets 10% more yield from the no-dig beds, and that is for the same amount of compost being added each year. Scientists in Norway analyzed his trial beds and found that the soil ecosystem was richer and more complex in the no-dig beds, and crop yields improved as well. They confirmed what Dowding observed directly. Disturbing the soil tears apart fungal networks and damages the physical structure and habitat of the soil ecosystem. The yield benefits matter, but so does the labor reduction. Traditional gardening demands endless digging, double digging, turning beds each season, and fighting the same weeds year after year. No-dig gardening requires a fraction of this effort. Garden Organic reports that no-dig methods generally produce similar or better yields than conventional systems, but with a lot less physical effort and time spent cultivating. Think about weeds for a moment. In traditional gardens, you dig constantly, which brings up buried seeds that germinate and forces you to dig again. It is an endless cycle of frustration. In a no-dig system, those seeds stay buried and remain dormant. Garden Organic notes that digging continually brings buried weed seeds to the surface and encourages them to germinate. Charles Dowding manages over 1,300 square meters of vegetable production at home acres. That is roughly a third of an acre. His personal labor investment is around 10 hours per week. The results he achieves include healthier plants, improved soil, better harvests, fewer weeds, fewer pests, and dramatically reduced physical work. Now, let's talk about how you can actually do this. Starting a no-dig garden is surprisingly straightforward. First, choose your site. You want good sunlight for vegetables, at least 6 hours daily. Access to water helps. Avoid areas known to be contaminated with heavy metals or chemicals from previous industrial use. You do not need perfect soil. In fact, you can start on almost any surface, including compacted clay or an existing lawn. If you are starting on grass or weeds, begin with cardboard. Use plain brown cardboard with no glossy coatings. Lay it directly on the vegetation, overlapping the edges by several inches. This smothers existing growth without any digging. Charles Dowding recommends putting cardboard on top of lawn because that smothers the weeds. Then put compost on top of that to around 10 centimeters deep, that is roughly 4 inches. You can plant into the compost right away. The plants will root into the compost and eventually into the soil once the cardboard has decomposed after around 10 weeks. Worms will do the heavy lifting. They tunnel through the cardboard as it softens. They pull organic matter downward. They create channels for air and water. They deposit nutrient-rich castings throughout the soil profile. You do not need to invite them. They will find the feast you have created. What if you already have established garden beds? The conversion is even simpler. Stop digging immediately. Apply 2 to 3 inches of compost on the surface. That is it. No incorporation, no mixing. Just let it sit. Soil organisms will begin incorporating it naturally within weeks. Timing matters for best results. The Core D Aline Press gardening column suggests that while compost can be added at any time, applying a layer 2 inches thick in the fall is best because it feeds soil organisms over the winter. The material breaks down slowly while providing protection against temperature extremes. For ongoing maintenance, expect to add compost annually, but the amounts decrease over time as your soil biology matures. Garden Organic recommends around 5 centimeters of compost or manure applied in autumn when crops are cleared, or on warmer soil in spring. As years pass and your soil ecosystem develops, you may find that even less is needed. One practice that supercharges no-dig systems is leaving roots in the ground after harvest. Instead of pulling out your tomato plants at the end of the season, cut them at soil level and let the roots decompose in place. As they break down, roots add organic matter to the soil, creating additional space for air and water to circulate. Those decomposing roots feed the fungal networks and bacterial colonies you are working so hard to nurture. What about costs? A no-dig garden started on existing soil requires only compost and cardboard. Compost can be purchased, but it can also be made from kitchen scraps and yard waste for free. Cardboard is available from any grocery store or from appliance deliveries. Compare that to the hundreds or thousands of dollars people spend on raised bed materials and imported soil. The clay soil that many gardeners curse is actually a valuable asset in the ground. Research published in the Roseburg News Review explains that clay is the functional component of soil. Its presence promotes humus formation and stores plant nutrients so they resist leaching. When you fill a raised bed with purchased soil mix, you often lose this clay component entirely. You trade stable, long-term fertility for something that looks good initially but degrades over time. I want to step back for a moment and consider what all this means beyond your individual garden plot. Agriculture worldwide faces a soil crisis. Industrial tillage has depleted organic matter across millions of acres. Carbon that should be stored underground gets released into the atmosphere with every pass of the plow. Soil erosion accelerates when structure is destroyed by cultivation. Your backyard garden might seem small in this context, but every garden that adopts no-dig practices becomes part of the solution. Research on regenerative agriculture confirms that avoiding tillage allows carbon to be sequestered beneath the surface rather than being released into the atmosphere. It is a small but significant step towards reducing our collective carbon footprint. Your no-dig garden also becomes a habitat. Beneficial insects find homes in undisturbed soil. Earthworm populations explode when they are not being chopped up by shovels. Fungal networks expand year after year, becoming more efficient at cycling nutrients. There is something almost poetic about this approach. For decades, gardening advice focused on control: sterilize the soil, kill the weeds, force nutrients into submission. Now we understand that the most productive gardens are those that cooperate with the living systems already present. The most advanced technology in gardening is not steel-raised beds or fancy soil mixes or expensive amendments. It is the ancient partnership between plants and fungi and bacteria that has been perfecting itself for 500 million years. 450 million years of research and development. Continuous improvement through natural selection. Systems that have survived ice ages and mass extinctions and continental drift. Your job as a gardener is not to replace this system. It is to stop interrupting it. So the next time you see those beautiful raised bed gardens on social media, ask yourself a question. What if all that money and effort could be redirected? What if instead of building walls to contain your garden, you built soil to sustain it? The answer is beneath your feet right now. An entire world waiting to be your partner rather than your project. All you have to do is stop digging and start trusting the processes that nature perfected long before humans walked the earth. Thank you for watching Secrets Beneath Nature. If this changed how you think about gardening, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I will see you in the next one.